This is Arthur, a tyrant who ruled the entire world with an iron fist. On his path to the throne, he killed his enemies, destroyed entire cities, and caused countless disasters, all just for power. But one day, he decided to think about everything he had done. The memories started attacking him, and the guilt began eating him from the inside. And suddenly, he had a heart attack and died.
As he was sinking into darkness, he heard a voice speaking to him. The voice told him he would be given a second chance, but this time he had to search for the light. Moments later, he opened his eyes. He saw two people standing in front of him. The man said his name was Reynold, his father, and the woman's name was Alice, his mother. Of course, they didn't expect him to understand anything, since he was just a newborn baby, but they were clearly very happy to see him. Arthur slowly started realizing the truth. These people were his new family, and he had been reborn just moments ago. He couldn't believe it, but at the same time, he felt a warmth he had never felt in his previous life, because his family truly cared about him. But there was one small problem. His body was now the body of a baby. He couldn't talk, couldn't even control himself, and every few minutes he ended up peeing himself. But in the middle of all this, he saw something even stranger than his situation. He saw Reynold gathering a strange energy in his hand. Then he struck a massive rock and shattered it with a single punch. Arthur was completely shocked. He had never seen this kind of power before, not even when he ruled the world. For Reynold, this was a huge achievement, so he proudly stood there, waiting for praise from his family. But unfortunately, he forgot to look above him. A piece of the rock fell directly on his head. Alice had expected something like this might happen, so she quickly ran to him and started healing him with magic, while scolding him for always showing off. Reynold might be a cheerful guy, but when it comes to fighting, he's actually terrifying. He can kill a huge wild boar with just one hit, which makes life much easier for the family. After the hunting trip, Reynold returned home excited to share what happened with his family. As for Arthur, he learned two very important things from everything he saw. First, this world is extremely dangerous, so dangerous that even ordinary people walk around carrying weapons. And second, if he wants to live freely in this world, he will have to learn how to kill. When Reynold returned home, Alice said it was time for sleep, and even though Arthur hates being treated like a child, this moment was actually the only thing he liked. In his previous life, he never had peaceful sleep. He was always afraid of assassination attempts, even while sleeping. Sure, he could survive them, but the pressure was slowly destroying him. After months, Arthur's body finally started getting stronger. The first thing he did was crawl toward the mirror and carefully look at himself. His parents thought it was just a cute thing a little baby would do, but Arthur was actually trying to accept that this was really his new face. Now that he could move, he decided it was time to start his plan. He crawled across the floor while Alice was busy in the kitchen. She didn't notice him at all until he reached the other side of the room. He opened the cabinet door, pulled out a book, and started reading. He wanted to learn more about the world he was living in. He discovered that the continent he lived on was called Decathan, and it was divided into 3 kingdoms. The Kingdom of Darv, home of the dwarves who lived in massive cities inside caves, the Kingdom of Eleanor, where the elves lived deep within the forests, and the Kingdom of Sapin, the human kingdom, ruled by a king. But unlike the world Arthur ruled in his previous life, no one here destroys cities just to take power. The throne simply passes down through inheritance. Arthur was still curious, so he opened another book. This book finally started answering some of the important questions that had been on his mind.
He had already noticed that the level of technology in this world was a bit behind, and the reason for that was magic. People here rely heavily on magic, which works through a type of energy called mana that exists inside their bodies. Magic isn't rare, and it plays a huge role in everyday life. There are two main ways to use it. The first one is called augmentation. In this method, a person focuses mana inside their body, which greatly boosts their strength and speed. The second method is conjuring. Here, a person releases mana outside their body and controls elements around them, like fire, water, and more. This information made things much clearer for Arthur. But there was still one thing he didn't understand yet, the healing magic Alice had used before. So he assumed it must be a special type of magic that not everyone could use. From what he read, most people only start sensing mana once they reach puberty. That's when they can begin controlling it through something called a mana core. And if they learn to control it well, they can become powerful mages. For Arthur, this concept was very easy to understand. In his previous life, he relied on a power called ki, and it worked almost the same way. So he decided to try it himself. He focused all his energy, trying to see if he could trigger a reaction. And it actually worked. His mana core slowly began to form. For Arthur, this was a very important step. But before he could continue training, Alice suddenly rushed toward him. She was terrified when she realized he wasn't in his bed. When she finally found him, she relaxed and immediately picked him up. While he was in her arms, Arthur noticed something strange. He got nervous for a moment, thinking she might have sensed the mana inside him. But the truth was much simpler. She just smelled something, because he pooped himself again.
2 years passed, and Alice was sitting, writing in her journal. She was happy to see Arthur growing up healthy and strong, but there was one thing that worried her. Since Arthur was born, he had never smiled even once. At that moment, she saw Reynold trying to teach Arthur how to use a sword. Arthur seemed excited, but she couldn't understand how someone could give a 2-year-old child a stick and call it sword training. Arthur knew very well that when Alice got angry, the whole world turned upside down. It was completely clear who ran the household, and apparently all the women in this world were like that. A little while later, Alice decided to take a walk in the city. Arthur was extremely excited because it was a perfect chance to gather information about the world himself. He saw many things for the first time. He noticed how simple the technology was, the weapons people brought, and strange things he had never seen before. But the best moment of the day was when he saw a mage using fire magic right in front of him. It was an amazing day for Arthur, but in the end, his small body got tired and he could barely stay awake. When they returned home, Alice wanted to put him to bed immediately. And even though this little body prevented him from doing many things, he had started to love this life. For the first time in his life, he felt the love of a mother and father. In his previous life, Arthur was an orphan. There was no one by his side. He grew up in an orphanage, never knowing real family warmth. So this new life was a beautiful change for him. In the next day, Arthur stood beside the window watching Reynold training in the garden. He was amazed seeing magic being used in real life in front of him. He started watching every movement Reynold makes while he focuses the mana inside his body. Seeing his father training made Arthur excited, so he decided to go down and train too. But before he could start, Alice called him. "Come on, my dear, it's bedtime." Arthur still couldn't speak, so he started whining. While passing by the library, he tried to grab a book, but Alice immediately said, "There's no time for that now." Normally, Arthur couldn't do anything, but recently he discovered a legendary move, the innocent child face. And the trick worked. Alice sighed and said, "All right, take the book, read a little, then you'll sleep." As soon as he was alone, Arthur started practicing magic. During the next 2 years, he actually managed to master it. He became able to gather mana inside his body and form a complete mana core. The process was very difficult, but the result was worth it. With just a little concentration, he could use his first spell. But the problem was that Arthur couldn't control his power very well, and when he released a large amount of mana, the entire house exploded. Alice and Reynold were outside the house when the explosion happened. The explosion was so powerful that Reynold's back got badly burned while he carried Alice away, but luckily they were both fine. Suddenly they remembered something important. Arthur was still inside the house. They ran inside as fast as they could. When Reynold entered the library, he was shocked. Arthur was standing in the middle of the room, completely unharmed, as if nothing had happened. But the truth was, he was the one who caused the explosion. A child who hadn't even turned 3 years old yet, and he could use magic at this level, even though magic usually doesn't appear before the age of 12. Arthur stood proudly in front of his parents, but he forgot something important. The house was collapsing above his head. A piece of wood from the ceiling fell toward him. He tried to escape, but there was no time left. Luckily, Alice jumped in front of him immediately and used her body to protect him. At the same moment, Reynold destroyed the falling wood using magic. Arthur was completely shocked. This was the first time in his life someone was willing to sacrifice their life for him. Alice hugged him tightly while crying after making sure he was safe, and this scene made Arthur cry as well. In his previous life, he was a king, and he was supposed to be ruthless without mercy. For example, once a man tried to assassinate him. After they captured him, the council gathered to decide his fate. They planned to send his wife and son to a camp where experiments and torture were conducted. The man kept begging Arthur to spare his family, but instead, Arthur killed them immediately, and he said that this was more merciful than what they would have gone through. But now, instead of spending his days executing people, he spends them training with his father.
One day, Reynold asked Arthur to try mana augmentation, but Arthur refused. He decided to use a sword instead. Reynold agreed and said, "All right, we'll train with swords." He grabbed his sword, but the surprise came when Arthur made just one move and easily cut through his father's sword. At that moment, Reynold realized something. Arthur's talent was not normal at all, and there was no other solution. This child needed a professional trainer. He went home and told Alice, but she immediately refused. She said, "I won't send my son to another city for training. We agreed. You teach him combat, and I teach him magic." But Reynold saw that this child was not ordinary. If he could cut a mana-enhanced sword, he could possibly become one of the strongest people in the future. That's why he insisted that Arthur needed a real mentor. Alice knew her son was talented, but she wasn't comfortable with the idea of letting him leave her side. Soon, the two of them started arguing. Neither could convince the other. Arthur watched their fight, then simply said, "Why don't you come with me to the city instead of me going alone?" They looked at each other, as if they were hearing the idea for the first time. Then they looked at Arthur and said, "This child is really smart." The next day, a carriage arrived to take them to the city. They were traveling with a few of their old friends. Arthur knew them already because they had helped his parents repair the house after he had destroyed it. These people were all part of the same team. Their leader was named Adam, who introduced himself to Arthur. Angel introduced herself as well, and so did Darren. Then Arthur noticed a girl standing on the carriage. She didn't speak, and the others told him her name was Jasmine. The last member of the team was Helen. After all the introductions, they got into the carriage and started moving toward the city. Alice asked Arthur if he was excited since it was his first long trip.
He answered normally, but inside he was thinking, "People here ride horse carriages. In my old world, I had a fleet of flying carriages." After a long day of travel, they decided to take a break. While setting up the camp, a pack of wolves attacked them, but the team handled them easily. Arthur watched, amazed. It was the first time he had ever seen real combat up close. He told himself he needed to become strong enough to face such dangers on his own. Since they now had a good amount of meat, they decided to roast it and have dinner at the campsite. Alf noticed that Reynolds' arm was hurting a bit, so he went to heal him. But Jasmine said, "Wait a moment, watch the area. The whole team is around you." Healers were very rare in this world, and if anyone saw Alice using magic, they could become targets. After she finished, everyone returned to what they were doing, but Adam decided to train a little with Arthur, wanting to see him firsthand. Adam charged his spear with mana and told Arthur to get ready. Arthur did the same, focusing his energy. As soon as they started fighting, Arthur used foot magic to move quickly toward Adam, then vanished and appeared in front of him. It was a very powerful move, and he could have landed a strong strike, but his leg betrayed him, and he fell. They started exchanging blows. Arthur slipped and flew through the air because his body was light. Before he hit the ground, the team started shouting at Adam, "Stay calm, he's still a child." But Adam couldn't control himself. He said, "I can't control my strikes." Sure, Reynolds trained him like a monster, but the truth was, Arthur hadn't learned these moves from anyone. He taught himself. Suddenly, Justine appeared behind him. She was amazed by Arthur's combat and his movements. She wanted to learn how he used magic in his legs. On the other hand, it was clear she would pester him until he agreed, and most likely he would end up teaching her in the end. The next day, the journey continued as planned. They took a few breaks along the way to rest. During one break, Adam began teaching Arthur the basics of using a spear, and Helen taught him how to use a bow. Arthur had no prior experience with weapons besides a sword from his old life, so these lessons were very helpful. The next day, Justine gave him a dagger as a thank you gift for teaching her. It was clear she had started to admire him, especially since he wasn't the type to easily connect with people. After a while, they all got back into the carriage and continued their journey. But suddenly, a group of bandits attacked. They were completely surrounded and ready. The gang leader ordered them to kidnap the boys and girls to sell them as slaves, and the fight began. All the adventurers tried to defend as much as they could. The team's strength, along with Reynolds, was far stronger than any single bandit, but the numbers were overwhelming. It was clear they would eventually be overpowered. Suddenly, Reynolds was hit and thrown onto the carriage from the force of the bandit leader's blow. It was a very strong hit. Alice tried to reach him, but he told her to stay back. If the bandits realized her strength, they would target her. He told Arthur to take her and escape. Arthur didn't want to leave him, but Reynolds said, "Alice is pregnant. You must protect her at all costs. You'll be a big brother." Arthur understood. When Reynolds gave the signal, he began preparing magic so they could escape. Reynolds kept attacking to give them time. The bandit leader ordered his men to chase them, but Reynolds stood in front of them with all his power. This time, Reynolds was fighting for his family and had no intention of giving up. At that moment, a few of the smaller bandits tried to attack Arthur. Adam and Jasmine confronted them and opened a path for Arthur to escape with Alice. Everyone was trying to protect Arthur, and he was doing everything he could to get Alice to safety. The strange thing was, in his old life, he would kill people without caring about their feelings. Now, he was running to protect someone important to him. After a while, Arthur thought they were finally safe, but he was wrong. One of the bandits was watching them from atop a mountain and knew how to use magic. He attacked them with his strong wind spell. Arthur didn't notice until the spell hit. All he could do was push Alice away and take the blow himself. The strike was powerful, knocking him as he fell from the mountain. For a child, this would normally be a fatal fall, but Arthur wasn't going to die alone. He remembered the dagger he had. He pulled it out and threw it at the mage, casting a spell. The dagger pierced the mage's leg, the string wrapping around his foot. Arthur managed to bring the mage down with him, and they both fell from the mountain. The adventurers behind tried to catch him using magic, but it was too late. There was no hope of reaching him. As Arthur fell, he started reviewing his life. Even though he knew he might die, a strange sense of peace filled him. Finally, there was meaning in sacrificing yourself for the people you love. Arthur sacrificed himself to protect Alice without thinking. He didn't feel regret, but he wished he could live a little longer. This time, not for power or revenge, but to live with the family he truly loved.
So, what will happen to our hero, Arthur? Is this really the end? We'll find out in part 2. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next part.